Okay, so let me just switch into English to welcome Professor Dominic McIver Lopes to our course on aesthetics. It's an honor and a privilege to welcome you in our course. And for us, it makes all the sense to welcome your first scientific initiative here in Gulbenkian, precisely in the course of aesthetics, where you can work with students from several courses in the university. Several subjects. So we have students from philosophy, artistic studies, literature, history, and they are all here together around the topics of aesthetics. So for us, it makes all the sense that you could come and visit us and work a little bit with our students. So I'm sure it will be an extraordinary moment, an extraordinary opportunity for all of us to hear you and to learn from you. So welcome and thank you very much for your presence. So let me just welcome also Professor Gonçalo, who is going to share with you a couple of words to present Professor Dominic. It is also important to have here Professor Gonçalo because he's, well, let's say that he's the most important element of the organization surrounding the visit of Professor Dominic. So it is also for me important to welcome him here in our course and to give him the floor so he can present Professor Dominic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luís.
Yes, good morning to the students here. I know most of you, even though not all of you. So I also teach here at the Department of Philosophy. Let me also say a word of welcome and thank you to the people who are watching online. So this is a dual format because we are doing an open lecture with the students and we are also transmitting. And so broadcasting live Professor Dominic's open lecture. So I'll be very brief because I don't want to occupy your time with just my presentation. I want to give the floor to Professor Dominic, but so I'll just say two things. First, we have been very fortunate here at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities and the Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies to host a number of Gulbenkian visiting professors who are leading scholars in their fields. And now, for the very first activity of his visit, we have Professor Dominic McIver Lopes, who is really a leading specialist in working at the intersection between aesthetics and the arts, I would say. And so he's one of the best-known experts in aesthetics, let's say, in the Anglo-Saxon world. We don't have traditionally a very strong connection with that body of scholarship. And so we are filling a huge gap, and it's for us an honor and an opportunity to have Dominic here. And so Professor Dominic McIver Lopes is a professor at the University of British Columbia. In the past, he has worked on the theory of pictures, for instance, and more recently, he has been dedicating himself to the theory of aesthetic value. What is value in aesthetics, and what is value pluralism, for instance? And this has gone in many directions. For instance, he has written a very interesting book on aesthetic and justice, just out of Oxford University Press. We are working on the translation of one of his books. Actually, it's not a translation of his book. It will be a book in Portuguese, gathering three recent articles, one of them at least still unpublished, and that will come out in Portuguese as a new book that doesn't exist as such as a book in English. It will be published at the end of February. And we will have a lot of activities, 3 workshops in January. The full program will be disseminated soon. And so yes, just to catch your attention, and please join me to welcome once again Professor Dominic McIver Lopes. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Obrigado. Bom dia. Eu sinto que em meu português vou falar inglês. Então, vou falar inglês. I realize this might be a challenge for some of you. Please feel free to interrupt. If I'm not speaking clearly, put your hand up, interrupt. If I say something and you don't understand exactly what I mean, put your hand up, interrupt. I have no trouble with interruptions. If there's something I'm saying that is conceptually not very clear and it's a small matter, put your hand up and interrupt. But there'll be lots of time at the end for deeper questions about Shaftesbury, about my interpretation of Shaftesbury, about the broader ideas that are in play here. So there'll be lots of time for those kinds of questions, but the smaller questions, just jump in, okay? So just feel free to interrupt. How many of you have read any Shaftesbury? Anybody? This is a remarkable feature of Shaftesbury that I'd like to begin with. So Shaftesbury was born in 1671. His name was Anthony Ashley Cooper, and his title became 3rd Earl Shaftesbury upon the death of his father. He was involved very actively in English politics on the progressive side. He was very actively involved in maintaining his vast estate, which was basically a farming proposition. And he was also very interested in philosophy. He wrote an important book called The Inquiry Concerning Virtue and Merit, which was published in 1699. And then he wrote a very interesting book that was published in 1711 called The Characteristics. You'll see here some quotations from the Characteristics and a reference to the English the standard English version. I don't know if there's a Portuguese version. I tried to find one on Google and I just gave up. Characteristics came out in 1711. Shaftesbury died in 1713. So he died in his early 40s, one of the great tragedies of philosophy, in my opinion. The Characteristics is a challenging book to read. I'll start from the middle and work my way out. So first of all, he republishes The Inquiry, which is a standard philosophical work like you would see from any of the other philosophers writing in the 17th, early 18th centuries. And then that's followed by a dialogue. Actually, it's not even a dialogue. It's followed by a text called The Moralists, which is a letter written by a well-established thinker to a young mentee who's studying at Oxford, all fictional. And wrapped inside that letter is a dialogue between the established figure and another figure and a bunch of clerics, churchmen. That's The Moralists. There's a chunk of The Moralists that is pretty straightforward philosophy, but a lot of it is rhapsodizing about the beauty of nature and about the meaning of life, and it's this very flowery purple, we say in English, purple prose, very flowery, almost poetic work. There is a long letter to the editor of a newspaper, which is about how we should have the right kind of emotion in public discourse. Some emotion is dangerous, other emotion is really relevant today, I think, where emotion is such a driver of thinking in social media. And then there is an essay on common sense. The essay on common sense is the one text of his I can make no sense of. I don't know what it's about, but it's about common sense, apparently. And then there's my favorite text, which is called The Soliloquy, which is kind of a literary selfie, where he is writing to himself. He's an author writing to himself as an author about how authors should think about themselves when they're writing for their audience. They should talk to themselves, soliloquy. So one of the puzzles with Shaftesbury is what is going on with this vast and sprawling text. Here's another puzzle. It was enormously influential. So he's really the first early modern figure to write an aesthetics. He really gets things going. Like there's no aesthetics in Descartes, there's no aesthetics in Spinoza, not really, these earlier figures. But he's a huge influence on Hume, he's a huge influence on Herder, he's a huge, Leibniz loves him. Leibniz says Shaftesbury is my favorite philosopher. So he's very widely read until the end of the 19th century. And then zip, he's gone. Nobody really reads him anymore. So one puzzle is, what were philosophers seeing in Shaftesbury that we no longer see? And one hypothesis is the text is just too difficult for us, but I don't believe that for a minute. We can read difficult texts. So it would be good to have a better explanation of the reception of Shaftesbury. When philosophers nowadays do go back and reflect on Shaftesbury, they say he's responsible for two ideas. I'm not even going to tell you what the ideas are right now, but if you're curious, ask me at the end, and I'll tell you. They say he's responsible for two ideas. In fact, he doesn't have either of those ideas. They're not there. It's made up. They're not actually there. So when we now reflect back on him, we say, oh, he's important because of idea number one and idea number two, but he didn't hold either of those ideas. It is so strange. I love this. It's a puzzle for me. I love the puzzle. What he does say is two things. for his aesthetics. So this is in the moralist. The inquiry is really about virtue, and the moralist really gives a lot of attention to aesthetics. And in the moralists, he says two things. He says, first of all, beauty and virtue are one and the same. Beauty and virtue are one and the same. So you could think of it this way. In other words, beauty implies virtue. Wherever you have beauty, you have virtue. And virtue implies beauty. Virtue implies beauty. Wherever you have virtue, you have beauty implies virtue, virtue implies beauty. This is kind of crazy. This is a crazy idea. And so I think that contemporary philosophers see this and they're just embarrassed. We can't pay any attention to that. That's just not going anywhere. And so many philosophers reading this will just say the arguments are a train wreck. It's a car crash. This is not going anywhere. Okay. Then he has another idea that really is this is the linchpin of the moralists, and I think hence of the characteristics. He has what he calls a hierarchy of beauty. Okay, so here, a hierarchy has levels. So here are the levels. On one level, you have the basic beauty. Gershwin, is it Gershwin? Rodgers and Hammerstein? Summertime, the song Summertime is beautiful, right? The old cathedral down here in Albadena is beautiful. The river is beautiful, right? So there are basic beauties. And then there's the beauty of the minds that create the basic beauties. And he calls that mental beauty. So he thinks that when a mind creates something beautiful, and it's intentional and successful, then we can attribute beauty to the mind itself. So there's the beauty of the created things, and there's the beauty of the creators of the created things that are beautiful. So that's the second level. And then there's that third level, which this is not his language. I'm going to call it meta-mental beauty. So there's beautiful songs, beautiful landscapes, beautiful paintings, beautiful suits and dresses, beautiful meals. There are the beautiful minds that create these things, but also minds create minds. Minds create minds. And when a mind creates a beautiful mind that's beautiful because it creates beautiful basic beauties, it's beautiful too. So what would be an example of a beautiful mind? Well, for Shaftesbury, the prime example is God. But he's also very clear that we create ourselves. We cultivate our capacities to be creative, to create beauty. So God's here, but we're here too. Well, God's at the top of this. Maybe this box has two levels, the God at the top and then us in the next level down, because God creates not only mental beauties who create beautiful things, but God creates the meta-mental beauties who cultivate their own capacities to create beautiful things. Okay, so that's another idea that's in Shaftesbury, that philosophers nowadays, they take note of it and they say, I don't know what this is all about. Neoplatonism. So it's true that there was this group of philosophers in Cambridge called the Cambridge Neoplatonists just before Shaftesbury's time, and he was influenced by them. But he was influenced by everybody. I don't think this can be the whole story. It's simply that he's some kind of a Platonist. I think that we should take seriously what he's trying to do here. Okay, so any questions about this so far? Are you following me here? So the two puzzles are, here are the puzzles I think we should address in order to understand why Shaftesbury was considered to be important in the past and maybe should get more attention now. What is going on with beauty and virtue are one and the same? Beauty is identical to virtue. And what is going on with this hierarchy? And what I'm going to do is focus on this and use this to understand this. So I'm going to take them together. I think if we don't take them together, it's impossible to understand either one. I think you have to take them together. Okay, so let's start with, if everybody's good, I'm going to begin by talking about why Shaftesbury thinks that anything that's beautiful is virtuous. Why beauty implies virtue. Okay, everybody follow me? Good? Yes, nod, yes, okay. See, now is the time to stop and ask questions if anything. All right, so beauty implies virtue. How are we going to understand this? Well, a good place to start is, what does he mean by virtue? Both concepts, the concept of beauty and the concept of virtue, are kind of slippery, multivalent. People use them in very different ways. We need to understand both of them, but I think that the more slippery of the two is virtue when we're looking at Shaftesbury. He's writing before Hume and before Kant. Everything looks very different before those two figures. Okay? So here's what virtue is. I'm going to tell you what virtue is. Virtue is harmony in a system, harmony in an affective system. Virtue is harmony in an affective system. Okay, I haven't helped you a lot there because you don't know what a system is and you don't know what harmony is and you don't know what affect is. So let's start with the system. This is, I think, the cool and core idea of the inquiry. Shaftesbury observes that when you have a complex entity, such as a cell phone, it has parts. That's why it's complex. And its parts are good if they contribute to the goodness of the whole entity. Say that again. So when you have a complex entity, it's made up of parts, and the parts are good if it's a sufficient condition when they contribute to the goodness of the overall entity. So this device here is a complex entity. It has parts. One part is an antenna. Another part is a microphone. Another part is a central processing unit. Another part is a memory chip. Right? They all contribute to its serving the function of oral communication. It's a telephone, right? Is the antenna good? Well, if it contributes to this being a good oral communication device, is the microphone any good? If it contributes to this being a good oral communication device, a good telephone, then the answer is yes. What would make this a bad telephone? The microphone or the antenna doesn't work, so I'm not able to connect to the network. Okay, so this is a very simple principle. All right, so when you have parts, here are 2 parts, let's say 3 parts, they make up an entity, and if they all contribute to the whole entities being good, then they're good. Now, the phone is a great example of what Shaftesbury has in mind by a system, because it's not just a telephone. It's also a camera. Okay, so now you have the camera. It's got a lens. Is it any good? Well, yes, if it contributes to the goodness of the camera. It has some processing software, some algorithms that it runs, are they any good? Yes, if they contribute to the goodness of the camera. Oh, systems nest. So now we take the whole iPhone, and it's a camera and a telephone. Two systems. Now, the phone as a whole is good if it's good as a camera and good as a telephone and good for writing down shopping lists and good for flaming people on Twitter, whatever they call it now, etc. Okay? This is part of me. I'd be dead without this. So now there's a system whose parts include this phone and me. It's good and I'm good if we contribute to whatever overall goodness we perform, good function we serve. So right now I'm lecturing, I'm teaching, right? So maybe I'm good as a lecturer, so let's put me in here. Maybe my goodness as a lecturer is a combination of my goodness as doing oral communication. Plus, I did some preparation on my phone. Like I was Googling for Portuguese translations of Shaftesbury. So now we're combining. Okay, so you could keep on going up. That's the first idea. Idea number one. A harmonious system is one where the parts are good because they serve the function of the whole entity to make it good. That's a harmonious system. What makes a harmonious system good? Okay, so let's go back to the phone. I said it has a good microphone, good antenna, good speaker, the parts of the telephone. They are good if they contribute to the goodness of the telephone. What makes the phone good? What makes the phone good is it's part of a larger system. What makes this larger system good is it's part of a larger system. What makes that system good? It's part of a larger system. What makes that system good? It's part of a larger system. When do we stop? We keep going up and up and up. It's an escalator, like at the mall. It just keeps on going. Right? So you have an escalator that keeps on going until you get the goodness of everything in the world, the goodness of the world. So for Shaftesbury is a very optimistic thinker. He thinks the world is good. Ultimately, good, and the goodness of the world is the top speed. So the goodness of the world, let's flip everything upside down. The goodness of the world is responsible for the goodness of the antenna at the end of the day. So from the goodness of the antenna, we get to the goodness of me lecturing, which we get to the goodness of you. I hope you're better off when you leave today. And I hope you're being better off makes the world, our social world, a little bit better off, which maybe makes the world a little bit better off. That's the idea. Okay, so Shaftesbury admits that we can understand these low-level types of goodness really well. And the higher we go up, the less we understand. And so he has a nice line. He says, the finite mind can never know anything fully. It requires an infinite mind to know anything fully because you need to keep going up the hierarchy all the way up to a picture of the world. And we human beings, we can't really get that inside our skulls. Okay, so now we have the idea that we have of what a system is and what a harmonious system is. What's virtue? Well, virtue is goodness in the harmonious systems that are you and I. So then the question is, what are you and I? And Shaftesbury's answer is, we are affective systems. We are creatures who feel. Not rational systems, we're that too, but really what makes us what we are is our feelings. We're affective systems. So here, Shaftesbury is super influential for British sentimentalism. Hutcheson immediately follows Shaftesbury, and Hutcheson's inquiry is supposed to be, it's not really, it's supposed to be a retelling of Shaftesbury. He gets Shaftesbury wrong, but nevertheless, that's kind of, he's right about sentimentalism. Okay, so we are affective creatures. Many creatures have feelings. So Shaftesbury thinks that animals have feelings. No problem with that. But there's a kind of feeling that is distinctively human, second order affect. So, okay, confession time. There are people who disagree with me, sometimes in writing. And sometimes they make mistakes, and I'm like, whoa, I'm glee. I'm happy that they make a mistake. My enemy has tripped, and then I feel disgust at myself. I say, Dom, you terrible person, you shouldn't feel that way. Okay, so my dog, Marco, sees his food, he feels very happy, but he's not happy about his happiness, right? And sometimes he has an appetite for rather disgusting things, rotten fish, but he's not disgusted at his appetite. Whereas me, I'm happy at my happiness, and I'm sometimes disgusted at my feelings. So we have feelings about our feelings. So the human being, affective system that is a combination of first order affects, where we're feeling things about the world, and second order affects, where we're feeling things about our feelings about the world. Okay, so virtue is just harmony in an affective system that has first order and second order affects. Like, this is nothing like Kant's conception of ethics. It's not even anything like Hume's conception of ethics. So it's like, there's no moral rules, there's no blame, there's no responsibility. It's just like, it's a way of ordering our internal lives. Focus on our internal lives and how they should be ordered to be harmonious. Okay. So then, any questions about this before we complete the story about why beauty implies virtue? Okay, so why is it the case that whenever you have beauty, you have virtue? Well, beauty is just harmony in an affective system where the affect is love of beauty. Here, this hierarchy can be a little bit helpful. They're the basic beauties of the world. They're unfeeling beauties. They have no affect. Like summertime, the song doesn't feel anything. A painting by Jackson Pollock doesn't feel anything, right? But when people make things beautiful, they're motivated to create beauty, and to be motivated to create beauty, for Shaftesbury, just as to love beauty. Why would, if we think about it for a second, we go out of our way. We can feed ourselves. We can just like have the basic staple. Do you know what craft dinner is? In Canada, students live on craft dinner, which is a box of macaroni with a little package of cheese, and you make a sauce, right? That's all you need to survive. I know because I survived for 3 years on craft dinner. You can live on craft dinner. But we go beyond craft dinner, right? We go to a lot of trouble and expense, time and expense to prepare nice meals. Why does anybody bother to paint? Have you ever tried painting? God, it's difficult, right? Messy, smelly, so long to learn how to do it. Speaking from personal experience, I put a lot of time into not just writing philosophy, but writing philosophy well. I want my ideas to be beautiful, and I want my expression of the ideas to be beautiful. Probably, I spend 3/4 of my time doing that, and 1/4 of the time having the ideas. I figure if I have the idea and I can't make it beautiful enough that my audience will care, it's not worth having that idea. So a lot of time goes into that too. So it's got to be love. So the step from here to here involves love. And the step from here to here, so just think about self-cultivation. I'm trying to remember the figure. There's a UNESCO calculation of the annual expenditure on aesthetic activity globally every year. It's in the trillions. And they're measuring, buying art, the expenses of running a museum, the expenses of running a record company. Anymore? I don't know. But anyway, recording industry, the expenses of education, schooling. So the minute you have a child, Gonzalo, you'll probably affirm that the minute you have a child, you begin to introduce it to aesthetic stuff. You begin to cultivate its capacity to respond and create, give it crayons, have it draw. You can save the money on crayons, but you don't. Crayons are important for children. Little pencils, colored pencils, right? All the way up to the Conservatory of Music. In the Faculty of Arts at UBC, we have the School of Music. The School of Music is the most expensive unit in the whole university. Why? Because most of their instruction is one professor and 1 or 2 students. How many students does the oboe professor have? Right? So it's so expensive. We don't care. In philosophy, we teach bigger classes so that the music school can have smaller classes. It's worth it. It's completely worth it. All right, so the cultivation of mental beauty, that's got to be loved. So one way to understand the hierarchy is in terms of motivation. We could say there's a kind of a motivational story here. Another way is in terms of cause. So this causes this, which causes this. It's because we send the kids to music lessons that they write these songs, and we have beautiful songs. So there's another way to understand the hierarchy, which is a causal way to understand it. Okay, so this is easy. You can now see that given Shaftesbury's rather broad conception of what virtue is, beauty is virtue. Because beauty is just harmony in an affective system where the affect in question is love. There's one more thing he says about this that I think I should mention, maybe. So the meta-mental beauty, it's kind of implicit in what I've been saying. If you go all the way up, you have, so each of these levels is an aesthetic system. Think of a song. There's the lyrics, that's a part of it. There's the melody, that's a part of it. There's the timbre, the instrumentation, right? That's a part of it. Those parts are good when the song overall is good. So a good song is a harmonious system. Think of the songwriter. Their ability to write lyrics is a part of what makes them mentally beautiful. Their ability to write the melody is part of what makes them mentally beautiful. Their ability to tune in what people want, what they can hear, that's part of what makes them beautiful. They're drinking lots of coffee, enables them to write the songs. That's part of what makes them beautiful. Why not, right? So mental beauty is goodness in an artistic system. Meta-mental beauties are good systems for creating mental beauties, for creating creative minds. And Shaftesbury is clear that he means us, we create our own minds, our friends, they help us to create ourselves, our partners, our social groups, society as a whole. These are all meta-mental beauties. And then there's God at the top of it all. But God, he's a deist. God for him is just like this empty variable. He's not thinking of a Christian God, right? He's a deist. So, all right. So that's why with beauty you get virtue. Because virtue is harmony in a system that comprises loves of beauty and loves of making self-cultivation, aesthetic self-cultivation. This is the easy part. Let's move on to why virtue this is my reading of Shaftesbury, right? So take this with a grain of salt. Nobody else is saying this, so I might be completely wrong. Why think that virtue implies beauty? Why think that where you have virtue, you're going to have beauty? Actually, I think that Shaftesbury does not establish this claim, but he gets close. He gets closer than anybody realizes. So I think it's still interesting. Here's where the hierarchy comes in. So I said one way to understand the hierarchy is motivationally. Another way to understand the hierarchy is causally. So this causes this, which causes this. But there's other ways to understand the hierarchy. Another way is cognitively. I'm just writing the word cognitively here. So how do you guys know Anne Carson, the poet, the Canadian poet? I highly recommend a work of hers called Autobiography of Red. Autobiography of Red. The life story of Red told in Red's perspective, the color red. So I love this. I love this book. And to understand what I see in the book, you need to understand what I see in her. When I read the poetry, I'm thinking about her as a creator of poetry. And when I think about her as a creator of poetry, I think of her as the person who wrote that book, right? So we understand basic beauty in terms of their creators, and we understand, or we appreciate the creator by appreciating their creative output, right? This is not news. Everybody knows this, right? So when you hear a new song and you're kind of driving with it, a question you're very likely to ask is, who's singing that song? Why do you care? Because knowing who sung it gives you a lot of information about what to look for in it and how to appreciate it better. Obvious, right? And we could even go up this way too. Oh, well, we do that. You need to understand the artist in her context. That's exactly what we're doing. We're understanding creativity in the context of creativity. What is it in the larger social environment, the larger physical environment that we need to know in order to fully appreciate and understand that act of creativity? So then we're going to understand the work ultimately in terms of the meta mental beauties. So a third way you can understand the hierarchy is cognitively. So here's three understandings of the hierarchy. There's the motivational one, there's the causal one, there's the cognitive one. Shaftesbury doesn't mention any of these. sort of, it's obviously talking about the causal thing, but that's not all that interesting. What he does say is, this is better than this, and this is better than this. More specifically, he says, meta-mental beauty is more beautiful than mental beauty, and mental beauty is more beautiful than basic beauty. These beauties are the most beautiful. These beauties are the middling beauties. These beauties are the least beautiful. Michael Gill recently wrote a book about Shaftesbury, which is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. He points out a lot of good things in Shaftesbury I mentioned. He's the first philosopher to really write about nature as a site of beauty, rather than a site of challenge and an obstacle to be overcome. For instance, Michael Gill thinks that the hierarchy is saying that these beauties are lexically ordered. Do you guys know what that means? A lexical ordering? A lexically ordered means that anything, the least beautiful mental beauty is more beautiful than the most beautiful mental beauty. And the least beautiful mental beauty is more beautiful than the most beautiful basic beauty. I don't think this can be true. Look, I'm learning about how to cook bacalhau. I'm terrible, right? But you might come to my place and show me a trick or two, and I get a little bit. So that's an improvement in my mental beauty, brought about by your mental beauty. But that's a little improvement? A tiny improvement. I don't know. Vermeer, the painter, how many Vermeers do we have? 26? Is that right? Does anybody know? We have a very small number of paintings by Vermeer. Having one more has got to be better than my learning to cook bacalhau a little bit better. Right? So I don't think this can be right. So the puzzle remains. What's going on with the hierarchy, and how can this help us to understand why virtue implies beauty? Okay, so I'm going to draw a distinction, which I think unlocks the mystery. The distinction is between two questions. An overall question. It's the question we've been addressing all along. What is beauty? Shaftesbury's definitely taken with this question, as are philosophers for the next, well, since him. We are still. But there's two ways of understanding it. There's the old way and there's the new way. And I think we should go back to the old way. So here's one way. One is in terms of demarcation. What demarcates beauties from other goods? So the Vermeer is enchanting. That's a good property that it has. The song is haunting. That's a good property that it has. Or the novel is politically disturbing. That's a good aesthetic quality that it has. My umbrella is good for traveling with, because it's small, right? That's good. We should not be skeptical about the existence of goodness, because there's such a thing as a good umbrella, and you know that, and you know what it takes to be a good umbrella, right? So that's not an aesthetic good. When it comes to speed, a gazelle is good, right? Speed of a gazelle is a good making feature of a gazelle. You know, the deer-like creature on the savannas of Africa. A student might be courageous in their study. Their family says, go to law school, go to law school, go to law school. And they say, no, philosophy, philosophy, philosophy. Right? So that's courage. Courage is good. You should be courageous students. But courage is not an aesthetic value. So question arises. We have aesthetic values, we have practical values, we have studently values, we have moral values, we have intellectual values. What demarcates the aesthetic values from the other values? What makes them different? I don't think any philosopher cared about this question until Kant. Kant definitely does. Before then, I think that philosophers were not interested in what demarcates aesthetic values or beauties from other values. They were interested in normativity. Okay, what does this mean? Fancy philosophical word. It means something relatively straightforward. Suppose that a song is haunting. So let's say the song is S. Suppose the song is haunting. The fact that it's haunting gives you reason to do things. Oh, no, sorry, I have to do this. What makes... These boards are too small. What makes the fact that the song is haunting reason to act? Okay, so you've got a song, it's haunting. The fact that it's haunting gives you reason to do stuff. You might have a friend over, and you say, oh, I'm going to play this song for you. And they say, why are you going to play it for me? And they say, it's haunting. And they respond, are you saying that the fact that it's haunting gives me reason to listen to it? And you say, yes. The fact that it's haunting gives you reason to listen to it. Or maybe there's a photograph that's just very disturbing. And you have a friend over, and they're about to look at the photograph, and you know something about their personal history. And you say, don't look at that. It's too disturbing. And they say, are you saying the fact that it's too disturbing is reason for me not to look at it? And you say, yes, the fact that it's too disturbing is reason for you not to look at it. The fact that adding a little bit of red to the canvas at this particular point will make the thing come together into a whole is a reason to put that red there. Right? The reason to modulate in a song from the major key to a minor key, the fact that modulating in a song from a major key to a minor key is just going to make people's spines crawl is a reason to do the modulation. The fact that an allusion to Anne Carson's poetry will enrich the meaning of the poem that you're writing is a reason to make the allusion. So I think many philosophers are asking the question, why are these facts reason-giving? Why is the fact that the umbrella is good to travel with a reason to carry it? Well, if it's good to travel with, I'm more likely to carry it when I travel. And if I'm more likely to carry it when I travel, then I'm more likely to get wet when I'm in Lisbon, not to get wet when I'm in Lisbon. Whereas if I have a big umbrella, I'll leave it at home and then I'll go to Lisbon and I'll get wet. So we understand this kind of reasoning. Why? Your students, you should be curious. Why should you be curious? Why is the fact that studying philosophy serves your curiosity a reason to study philosophy? Well, because in being curious, you generate more ideas, and we need ideas to save the world. The world's going down the toilet. We need your ideas, right? So therefore, study philosophy because it will serve your curiosity, or study whatever you're studying because it will serve your curiosity. So normativity is a general phenomenon, but in the aesthetic case, it's especially puzzling. I think if aliens came down to Earth and they saw people walking around with little white things in their heads going like this, they'd think, what the hell is wrong with these creatures? They'd be really puzzled, right? If they came down to Earth and they went to the Gulbenkian Museum in Lisbon and they saw people, backs are hurting, their feet are tired, they really need a coffee, but no, they're standing there going like this in front of blobs on the wall, they'd be puzzled. That puzzlement can be addressed by answering the normal question. Why is the fact that something is beautiful reason for us at all? Why do we just not ignore it? We don't ignore getting wet. We don't ignore filling our bellies. We don't ignore cultivating our minds so that we can have ideas that will save the world. That's all obvious, but it's not so obvious why, what the source of aesthetic normativity is. Why we have reason to act on facts about the aesthetic values people have. Okay, so almost done. 5 more minutes. I think that here's my proposal, that the hierarchy for Shaftesbury does have a motivational element. It does have a causal element. It does have a cognitive element. That's not what he focuses on. What he focuses on is strength of reasons, normative reasons. These are the most strong reasons. These are less strong reasons, and these are even less strong reasons. Okay, what's my argument for this interpretation? Well, I'm going to say something, go back to the structure of the text that I began with. Okay, so first of all, I said you've got the inquiry, which is where he talks about harmony being virtue. Then you have the moralists, which brings in aesthetic. And then we have the idea that there's this hierarchy of beauty, and this hierarchy of beauty is at the center of the moralist. You have this claim about beauty and virtue being one and the same. And also in the moralists, have a discussion of the self. So the first part of the philosophical stretch of the moralists is a summary of the inquiry. And then there's a discussion of beauty, and that gets dropped, and he talks about the self, and then he comes back to beauty, gives us the hierarchy, and then it's over. That's how it ends. And no other interpreters have tried to understand why there's this discussion of the self in the middle of the moralists, the middle of the aesthetic discussion in the moralist. And he says things like, I don't know if I can quickly. Oh, well, you'll see in the Goblets a bunch of quotations, really nice quotations. He's conveying the importance of the self. He doesn't have a theory of the self. He was a student of Locke's. He agrees with Locke that the self is not a material object, but he disagrees with Locke, who thought that the self is a psychological continuant, basically memory. But he doesn't substitute another theory of the self. I think that, but he does say a bunch of things. He says that we need without, okay, 2 things. First, we live our lives by exercising control over our affective constitution, how we are put together effectively. And the second thing he says is, if we let our affects be driven, as they are nowadays by social media, by the opinions of other people, then we're slaves. We need to stabilize our affective selves because what we are is affective. I think that he has a conception of the self that's a regulative ideal. He doesn't have a metaphysics of the self. He doesn't say this is what it is to be a, but he says we should live our lives so that our feelings are working for us. Feeling is important, but it's also treacherous. It's our point of vulnerability. So we need to get that right. We need to stabilize the self. So the aesthetics begins with the discussion of the aesthetics. He brings in this idea of the self, and he says we need to stabilize ourselves, and then we get the hierarchy of beauty. Okay, the higher up you go from here to here and here, the more constancy and stability you have. You see this especially if you think about the meta mental beauty that is society, social arrangements, the arrangements by means of which we educate ourselves aesthetically. That's the most stable thing, the most hard to change thing, right? That's the big truck that's hard to steer, whereas there's more wiggle room and flexibility for our activities at this level. You know, this is both the beauty and the tragedy of social life. We have to have it, but it's hard to change. It's being hard to change is really important to us. It's a plus and a minus. Okay, so here's where the conclusion I think that Shaftesbury is justified in drawing from this. Virtue implies beauty insofar as beauty is one way of stabilizing the self. I don't think it's the only way. There's other ways of making ourselves more stable, like through education, through friendship, through partnerships, through joining in with others. These are all ways of stabilizing the self. Without society, we'd be kind of like manic creatures. We're living in a structured environment and a structured social environment that kind of, it's a good thing and a bad thing. And it's a two-edged sword. It stabilizes us, but it also locks us in. So there's a lot that stabilizes the self, but beauty is one of the things that stabilizes the self. Now, I think that Shaftesbury is here arguing for the hard case. He says this. He says at the end of the moralist, oh, it's one character talking to another character. The character says, how are we going to persuade anybody else of this? This is crazy. Everybody's convinced that there is nothing less stable, nothing more variable, nothing more subject to the whims of fashion than beauty. But in fact, we're saying that in fact, beauty is a source of stability in our lives. That is why we have reason to respond to the hauntingness of the song by listening to it, why we have reason to create the song, why we have reason to shape a social environment and a physical environment in which that creativity is possible. Okay, so that's my hypothesis. Let me just end with the story. I'm not a historian. All of my work until very recently has been in contemporary philosophy. I've just been asking questions and answering them using the rules of contemporary thought without looking at any old texts at all. This is very common in Anglophone philosophy. It's the dominant tradition in Anglophone philosophy. History is kind of, it's there, it's important, you learn it, but it's not, you don't do philosophy by doing history. I've become interested in history. And I've become particularly interested in the puzzling cases, like the case of Shaftesbury. I have a friend, Gary Eisenmenger. He taught at Carleton College in Minnesota in the United States. And he had a rule, people call it Eisenmenger's rule. Eisenmenger's rule is never assume that a great philosopher is a damn fool. Now, it's compatible with that they are a damn fool. It's compatible with that they're completely wrong. It's compatible with that they're a little bit wrong. But we should proceed on the assumption that they're not a damn fool. Because I think we get interesting ideas that way. And maybe looking at Shaftesbury with Eisenmenger's rule in mind can be quite profitable. So I'm now doing history. I'm writing this book in the history of aesthetics. This Shaftesbury is one chapter. You're the first audience to ever hear my take on Shaftesbury. In philosophy, you know, we don't have laboratories. We don't have surveys. What the hell do we have? We have each other. I need the people around me to say, hold on, what about this? Hold on, what about that? Hold on, you can't be serious, Don. So maybe you can do that for me now, so that I can make some revisions that will make this a better chapter. Okay, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I think we have half an hour, is that right? We have about half an hour? Okay.
Luís, e têm colocar as vossas questões, se precisarem de alguma tradução, como vos disse no início, aproveitem a presença da professora Dominic.
Okay, so there's a question here. You know, just jump in on each other's questions. I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. Your name, please tell me your name.
I am Diogo Ferrer.
Diogo.
I am a professor. So, maybe two obvious questions. How to deal with ugliness, all that negative part of what we'll call nowadays static value would be one question. Of course, we could speak about 18th century discovery of negativity by, for example, Lisbon earthquake and
Yes.
so on. That so in about the emergence of ugliness as statical value, especially I suppose after Kant and 19th century. Well, that would be one. What about it? And the other one would be, well, if we say that mental beauty is more important, or in some sense hierarchically superior than mental beauty, and mental beauty than basic beauties. Well, but we cannot leave also mental beauty senseless without basic beauty. So maybe basic beauty in that sense is more essential than the others. So how to build an hierarchy if the higher level needs its expression in the real beauty we sense? Well, those would be two obvious questions.
Yes, good. So there's
I'd like to. Oh, thank you a lot for your exposition about Shaftesbury. It was great.
Thank you so much for this question. Okay, so yeah, first ugliness. One of the great things about history is it just shows you, like it hits you in the face with how our thinking has changed. I think that for Shaftesbury, my reading of Shaftesbury, and I think this is true for, I think this is true for Hume too. So for many figures pre-Kant, pre-1790, beauty is very broad. I think that beauty here is aesthetic value, aesthetic goodness. Aesthetic goodness is very broad. So something can be aesthetically good by being shocking. Something can be aesthetically good by being ugly. So there's ugliness as a demerit and ugliness as a merit. Like, something can be too beautiful and it's aesthetically, in a broad sense, aesthetically good. Or aesthetically not good. So I think that a good way to see the shift in history here is with the notion of the sublime. So with Burke and Kant, you get a distinction between beauty, which is one kind of aesthetic value, and the sublime, which is another kind of aesthetic value. Beauty is comforting and nourishing, and the sublime is awe-inspiring and shocking, knocks you to your existential foundation. Unpleasant. Milton identifies the sublime as a kind of beauty. So there's an earlier conception of beauty in which beauty and the sublime are not incompatible. In fact, the sublime is a kind of beauty. I think that for Shaftesbury, something can be, a work of art can be a harmonious aesthetic system when one of its parts is ugly. I think that Shaftesbury would be totally fine with a paintings being beautiful because it depicts this horrendous crucifixion, right? Or it depicts a horrible slaughter. I think that there's nothing in his way of thinking that suggests that that would be unthinkable for him. There's another element of this that I'll mention. It's kind of interesting. The distinction between the beauty and the sublime is made in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and it's gender. It's introduced as a gender distinction. So beauty is feminine and the sublime is masculine. That's how it's introduced. Hence, the sublime is more important than the beautiful. And we eventually end up in the 20th century with beauty being totally unmentionable. And art is only there to shock us. That's the remnants of the sublime. Well, for earlier thinkers, they don't have this gender division. Right? It's all part of it's all part of one. So here, I think the earlier mode of thinking is better. It's the one we should return to. The other question, so I think that ugliness is to be accommodated within Shaftesbury's system in the way it can't be for Kant. There's no way for Kant to handle this. All right. Yeah, so in the hierarchy, everything is essential. We need all three levels. So there's an ontological dependency. So I said that there's a causal story here, a motivational story, a cognitive story, and then a normative way of understanding the levels. There's also an ontological way of understanding the levels. I hadn't thought of this, but you're absolutely right about this. This needs this, this needs this, this needs this, this needs this, right? There's beauty in nature, but it's evidence of God's mental beauty. Everything in nature is an artifact. So Shaftesbury, works of art and nature, they're all artifacts. So there's an ontological interdependence across here. The normative claim is just that what's fundamentally reason-giving is this. And then derivatively, we have reasons to exercise our mental beauty. And then even more derivatively, we have reasons to engage with the basic beauties. But if it's true that our reasons to engage are reasons to stabilize the self, then they're grounded in it. So this is normatively fundamental. I'm not sure if that's the best way to put it exactly. Gonzalo? Sorry.
Yeah, picking up the mic. So yeah, thank you for your wonderful presentation. We're off to a very good start, very promising start.
Thanks.
I'm sorry to say that I don't really know Shaftesbury, so this
Nobody
question,
does.
Yeah, out of sheer curiosity and maybe a bit naive. So Yeah, just perhaps a small comment. I mean, I could really see like the Platonic backdrop. I mean, it's almost like the hierarchy of the forms up until, you know, the Kalon Kagaton, the good and the beautiful. So this just quickly raised a question, perhaps a little bit of follow-up to what Professor Diogo has asked. So if this is like a virtue theoretical account of the beauty, and if I understood you correctly, basically the normative grounding for beauty is that it can help like stabilize the self. I mean, what would be an account of the vices? That is, what would account as a vice, even as in aesthetical terms, for Shaftesbury? Because if we think of this in terms of epistemology, for instance, in Plato or Aristotle, we know what is an epistemic vice. If we think this in terms of ethical virtues, we know what is a vice for Plato and Aristotle. But consider the case in which a person's addicted to beauty in a way that doesn't stabilize the self, that is kind of like disruptive. I know that I'm like sliding over to the moral rather than the aesthetic, but I was just curious about this. I had another question about, I don't really know, but I think Schleiermacher in hermeneutics, for instance, and I knew that he was kind of influenced by Shaftesbury in an indirect way, and you mentioned also the influence in Herder, who in turn influenced Schleiermacher. And Schleiermacher talks about, you know, the aesthetic beauty of a people or a given period in history, etc. I wonder if Shaftesbury also points towards that direction.
Okay, good. In a way, he does, but it's implicit and indirect. You're bringing out some really nice points. So, let me begin by saying that the answer to the normative question that I gave, which appeals to our basic human interest in being stable affective selves, is not the only answer. He gives two. So the other one is happiness. So the fact that the song is haunting is reason for you to listen to it, because it will contribute to the happiness of your life. It will also stabilize the self. The happiness point is a really very familiar one, so I didn't mention it. But I mention it now because both happiness and stability, we have to understand them in terms of now we've got, where's this thing? Not an iPhone. Let's move. We've got me. Okay, so we've got me, and I am made up of a bunch of affects, feelings, right? I'm an affective system. The affects are good to the extent that they contribute to the goodness of the entire system. It's good if I am a part of a larger system that's good. Okay, so then the question is, what is that goodness? It's happiness. It's got something to do with happiness. It's got something to do with stability. What's the larger system? Well, there are lots of larger systems. Shaftesbury is really eloquent about it. Romantic couples. He talks at great length about friendship. Somebody needs to write a book on Shaftesbury on friendship. Nobody's done it. Sitting there waiting to be done. Future graduate students in philosophy. It's a great project. He's so interesting. There's hundreds of pages. And it's not like anything you've ever seen before. It's really good. So romantic couples, friendships, social groups, social circles, nations, global humanity. That's almost the words he uses, just everybody on the planet. These are good to the extent that they make those good. The goodness of those resides in their being sources of happiness and stability as well. So these affects are all the pro-social affects. Here he is appalled by Hobbes and Locke, because they're his enemies. Hobbes and Locke are the enemy. Human beings are social creatures. We just are social creatures. You've got to start with that assumption. There's nothing that makes us social. We come social out of the box. Open the box and we come out social. That's Herder as well, right? So this is one of his big lines of influence. And then his understanding of sociality. It isn't like culture yet in Herder's sense, but it's definitely going in that direction. All right, then there was another question about disruptiveness. And so this is good. He doesn't think about this for a second. He's living in a world where they're not yet aware of disruptive genius, right? They're aware of talent that maintains our standards, but they're not aware of talent that gives us the standards. And so that's not in the picture, but I don't see anything in the picture that excludes it. So it should, pro-social emotions can, I think, if we step back from the text itself and just look at this in a larger perspective, pro-social emotions can include ones that motivate some individuals to do things that are new. And that is good, so long as they're still pro-social because they change what's going on at the higher level. Okay, so here's Rice, I think, is an attempt, it's going outside the bounds in an attempt to change society and failing. Whereas it can be a virtue to go outside the bounds and change society successfully. Actually, Shaftesbury's, he was a Whig. So he was in the progressive wing of British politics. He was a radical. So he must have had some idea that it is a virtue to try to overturn the maybe not, he wasn't a revolutionary, but he definitely was in favor of major change to the political system. So that's really good. That adds a nice element to the story here. We should think of the pro-social emotions as conservative pro-social emotions. They can be pro-social emotions that motivate acts that bring about social change. So it's not that a heavily moralized conception of vice. Yeah, I don't think we get that from. Right. Yeah.
Agora faça uma pergunta sem medo, a gente vê duas forças.
Go ahead. Any questions are good questions. Oh, is it? Oh, sorry, yes. Any questions are good questions.
See? Okay. I think I was just thinking about like the sum of the parts, the good parts. They are like, the parts are good as long as they contribute to the larger system. And about the set, there's a sublime that is like, if you see a painting about cannibalism, you might find it beautiful, but how does that translate to the qualities of people that are not good at all? And if they maybe on a like in a romantic relationship, jealousy is a bad trait and it's not contributing to the harmony, but maybe it brings about like if you go up the escalator, maybe that inspired like the most beautiful art or like things above that relationship that is good because it's the like very human part, it's the bad part. So I guess,
yeah,
is there a place for the bad parts of people in this, or is it like I don't know.
Maybe there's no place for being a dirty lying cheat, but stubbornness is not good, right? Oh, but hold on, maybe it is good. Okay, so there's like maybe we're best off in a setting like this, where you're all. What matters is that collectively we get some improvement, we get closer to the truth, if you want to put it that way, right? But maybe the best way for us collectively as a whole to do that is for us individually to be stubborn. So I will be individually stubborn about my views, and I will argue for them tooth and claw and as hard as I can. And you will argue for your views as hard as you can. And you will argue for your views as hard as you can. And then we see where we are at the end of the day. There are philosophers of science who think that science works this way. Maybe they're right. So I don't know. I think that it can be complicated. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope this works. So first of all, thank you for coming here for this lecture, this presentation, and I think in general I understood everything. There's just one thing that is puzzling me, and I'm having some trouble with it. That is, when you talked about us, human beings having that second emotion, for example, I can do something, and in that moment I'm happy, but then later when I'm revising it, I feel like sick of myself and I regret it and I become unhappy of something that before made me happy. When we are talking about beauty and all of these systems and has the work, I didn't understand if the to something be beautiful, is it necessary that the first emotion is equal to the second? Or I can, for instance, be happy about something and that later brings me sadness, but it still is beautiful and it still works in the system. I don't know if you understood the question.
Good. I don't. So we're very accustomed to the idea that aesthetic value is hedonic value. For something to be beautiful is for it to have the capacity to give us pleasure. There certainly are lots of philosophers who have that view. Kant would be the big example. Aesthetic value is a hedonic value. It's pleasure. It's a kind of pleasure. Shaftesbury doesn't seem to have that idea at all. He does think there's a connection. He thinks that what makes the fact of something beautiful reason for us to act is that in so acting, we can make our lives happier. But he's actually scathing about the idea that happiness just reduces to pleasure. He doesn't think happiness and pleasure are the same thing. He has the idea that beauty gives us reason to act because it stabilizes the self. And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with pleasure. He talks about affect rather than pleasure. Among the affects are the second order affects that you're mentioning, right? So I can have a feeling and then I can look at, he actually uses Locke's idea of reflective sense. So I can reflect on my own responses. And I can have a feeling about my first order responses. That is in service of getting my affective life under control. Like small children, how old is it?
She's 5.
They're narcissists at a certain age, right? 3, maybe 2 or 3. They're nothing but bundles of ego. And they have to learn how to control themselves. Actually, in my experience with my son, mostly when they went to school, right? They saw the reactions of other students, of their friends, and they internalized them. They internalize them as second order actions. They then begin to think, I want, oh, that's not good. Right? And so they bring their own affective lives under control. And they become, that as that happens, maybe this is psychological, as this progresses, they become more a person with their own distinctive character. As long as you're nothing but reactions to goodies around you and aversions to disgusting stuff around you, you're not really a thing of your own. What makes you a thing of your own is your selectivity. These are the goods I respond to. Those are the bads that I'm averse to. And that requires self-regulation of affect. So I think that that's the idea in Shaftesbury. What about those other books? At the end, there's the, oh, I didn't tell you about the miscellaneous reflections. At the end of the book, it's crazy. It's 5 chapters of miscellaneous reflections, which is a mix of a book review or like summaries for students. There's this guy, Shaftesbury, he wrote this stuff, this is what he says. He's so obscure, I'm gonna make it, this is what he said. It's so really difficult. Here's what's really going on. And it's mostly correct, but there are mistakes. And then it's scathing criticism. Like the kind of criticism you see at the bottom of the comments online. You know, it's like he's writing about his own stuff. He says, this guy Shaftesbury, he's an idiot. So there's that. What's going on there, and what's going on with the soliloquy, talking to yourself, and the letter to the editor, and all of that. I think that what he's doing is modeling how you become reflective about your own emotions in a sophisticated way. So at first it's just like, oh, I'm taking pleasure in my opponent's misery. That's bad. But then we can do that at a higher level of sophistication. And how does that work? And he thinks that literature helps us with that. That's what literature is for. Helping us to reflect on our own affective lives in ways that give us control over our own affective lives so that we become the people that we are, different from other people. Because all 2-year-olds are the same. They all want lollipops. They're all the same, right? So I'm exaggerating. There are differences. We really become the characters that we are. I don't know what it's like here, but I love teaching first-year students at UBC because they come from all over the world. Like 40% of our students are from outside Canada. They're from all over the world, and they're meeting new people, and they're figuring out who they are. They're mostly doing it through aesthetics, right? Through music, through art, through evening activities, which are mostly aesthetically focused. So I think that Shaftesbury is there's something right about that. If you have any thoughts that you're too shy to convey, or maybe they're not yet fully formed in your mind, or you think they're kind of complicated and you want to write them down, send me an email, and I'd be very grateful. I think we're probably close to time. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Dominic, for this extraordinary moment, for this truly beautiful philosophical moment. So we are truly thankful for your presence here. And so I think we could join in a round of applause at the end of this extraordinary lecture. So thank you.
Thank you.